UAP Tube, episode 3, take 5. Jesse Michels, Dave Rossi, Blue Beings, Advanced Physics, Esoteric Wisdom Traditions, The Body as Technology, you name it, they get into it. It's really, really intense. This conversation is so intense that you kind of have to watch it like several different times in order to understand it. I have 7 pages of notes that I took. And if you saw my TikTok video about this interview, I'm on at Color Standard. My initials are ET, so that's why it comes up as that name. I did like a really quick and dirty video, like a 3-minute video on this, and it's very intense, but it kind of like gives you the highlights and sort of tries to thread the needle of all of this stuff. So, what my key insight to this whole interview is that advanced physics are all derived from esoteric forms of wisdom traditions or religions. You have Oppenheimer was studying Sanskrit, as was Einstein. Steve Jobs' only book on his iPad was Autobiography of a Yogi, and he read it once a year. Um, these scientists, even like Newton, and yeah, Isaac Newton, he attributed his discovery of gravity to like something outside of himself. You'll hear it over and over and over again, but between like artists, creators, scientists, anybody who's sort of like bringing a new idea into the world, you will hear them talk about these ideas coming from them from outside. In fact, Prince famously said, like, it was like 3 in the morning, and he's like, I gotta record this song. I gotta record this song. Otherwise, Michael Jackson's gonna get it.
But my favorite line, which she said to me and which we have in the Broadway show, is he would get inspiration in dreams. And he said, God gave me this idea. And if I don't use it, God's going to give it to Prince.
They knew that they all know that they're pulling from the ether. Okay. These ideas are not coming from within us. They're coming from somewhere up there. Um, so I will say, like, this is extremely esoteric, this conversation. And my biggest takeaway is that the body, like our bodies, human bodies, are technology. And between my other 2 videos about sort of telepathy and like the divine feminine and sort of these premonitions from or prophecies from Chris Bledsoe about the divine feminine, if you go back to Mary Magdalene's Lost Gospels, there are 3 versions of this, and scholars agree that these apocryphal texts that were found, I think they were found in I can't remember where they were found, the caves. They all, there were 2 Coptic versions and 1 Greek version. And so they kind of, because writing was a big deal back then, they all agree that these are real and that this lost gospel of Mary Magdalene was copied and translated into different languages because it was revered, it was respected, and it was sacred. If you go back and you study that gospel, it gets you up to a point, and then in every single version of the gospel, the same pages are missing. What we can infer is that Mary Magdalene was essentially the first telepath. The way that she witnessed Jesus's resurrection was from her third eye, or her heart, third eye. It was this brain heart coherence. And because she asks, how am I seeing you? Is it through my eyes or through my mind or through my, like, she couldn't figure it out. And he starts to explain, and then all of those pages are missing, of course. But she was using her technology. And I think it speaks to, what's going on in the UAP conversation right now with all of the egg-shaped crafts and the reports of divine feminine and energy and the prophecies. So it's something to keep in mind, right? Like, that's something to keep in mind before we dive into this conversation with Dave and with Jesse. So they are like so insanely smart, and it is a very difficult conversation to follow. And I think I mentioned this, but you have to really commit to listening to this. You have to commit to taking notes, you have to commit to doing extra reading to kind of understand all of this stuff. So I'm going to go through some of the notes that I took, and then I'm going to try to thread the needle for you at the end because in fact, Dave Rossi and I have some similarities. He has an experience. This is early COVID. He starts a podcast about UAPs. He has an experience with a blue being that he describes as like energetic. He says it was humanoid, but maybe he doesn't really describe a face so much as he says like it has hands, arms, and legs. And then it's blue and it's very tall. And after that interaction, it showed him like a lot of like scientific principles that we were missing. And after that interaction, Dave starts to understand advanced physics and he has this new interest in physics and electrical engineering.
Can't say for certain because I don't know if it was a physical experience or a purely an energetic or spiritual one. But
Sure.
I recall opening my eyes and I saw all this basically white light around me, but it seemed like it was a very convex type structure. And then I recall seeing, I felt like I was very drowsy, and I recalled seeing this blue being basically standing very close to my head. And then next thing I knew, I basically closed my eyes, and I woke up the next morning, and I had all of a sudden this extreme drive and inclination to study electrical engineering and quantum physics in particular. And I knew absolutely nothing about it. I failed math, I think, almost every year of high school. And so I spent the first 2 years from there basically learning.
It's a very like interesting, compelling story. Obviously, Jesse Michaels is not going to shy away from this. I will be honest without going too deep. Dave and I have similarities there. I've had some experiences and I have a new interest in electrical engineering and physics. My background is that I am a formally trained fashion designer, so I don't have a background in any of this. So this interest came newly. It's a new interest. So anyway, they're really talking about like, okay, all of this science, right? But like, what does it mean practically? Practically speaking, this science means exotic propulsion, meaning like anti-gravity. It means free energy. So like energy that's not hooked up to a grid that we don't have to pay for. It doesn't have an output, so like it doesn't pollute the environment. They talk about healing principles. They talk about just like new ways of like generating energy, essentially, right? So those are big implications on our economy. And I just want you to consider what our economy is like based on is like oil and gas, is like a large part of it, being hooked up to a grid, paying into a system. Those systems make a lot of money, they generate a lot of wealth. Okay, so like if they collapsed, what would happen, right? Like it would kind of flatten things, um, which in my opinion would be amazing because everybody would have access to the energy that they need. They wouldn't have to pay into a system. It could end poverty. It could end hunger. It could end all kinds of suffering. It could also end pollution, which is something I'm personally interested in. And um, it's a very real scenario. And we just have to think about like who is interested in this and why would they want to potentially keep this under wraps, right? So, all right, let's kind of get into it. Everything comes back to longitudinal scalar waves. This is something that the being told Dave Rossi in their interaction. And right now, in sort of like basic physics, you only have like these horizontal waves. Like they only kind of let you study these horizontal waves, apparently. And I'm a novice at this, so if anything doesn't make sense or you know it's wrong, please leave a comment because this is the only way that I'm learning. But this is what I'm taking away from this conversation. So he's really interested in these longitudinal scalar waves. Okay. Like, and he says that this is sort of the key, that these longitudinal waves create caduceus-like structures. Okay, caduceus is that like medical symbol, with the two DNA strands and the wings at the top. It's like snakes that goes into like wings. It's like the universal symbol for doctors and healing. He references the work of Konstantin Meyl, and Konstantin Meyl named them heliocoidal waves. Okay, so like he's relating it to the fact that they look like DNA. Well, then they talk about how our DNA structures are like the same shape. So perhaps there's some sort of link there. And they go on to say that DNA is a receiver, and they reference the work of Luc Montagnier, who's a like Nobel Prize winning virologist, that he discovered there are aqueous nanostructures in DNA that involve communication and storage. Okay, so like think about that from like a communications perspective with perhaps these longitudinal scalar waves. Okay, so in this scalar field, like the scalar waves that are longitudinal, they create more dynamism to the nature of the typical UI models, like the flat space-time waves that we study in typical physics. Okay, so it's matrix, right? Like you have these horizontal waves, and then you have these longitudinal scalar waves, and it's creating this grid, if you will. So basically, they're saying, and they reference, the body is like a capacitor. Capacitors are an in and an out, but it's like a holder of energy. Okay. Then they talk about how the soul is plasma. Plasma, as we know, has been referenced like recently studied by scientists, and they're saying that like plasma could be conscious, and that there were some plasma balls over the pyramids in Egypt that they admitted like they didn't really know what they were. Obviously, all the talk about the orbs all over the world. Are those plasma? Are they conscious? Are they the NHI? So there's a lot of talk about plasma, right? And we know that, let me see if I can find where they referenced plasma, because he said that plasma basically slows down states through consciousness. So plasma may be the secret to like inertial mass reduction. Um, it's if it's in time and space, then it could be the reason why like potentials collapse into the field, into the present.
If you think of the quantum vacuum all around us as moving very, very rapidly, maybe faster than the speed of light or maybe at the speed of light, think of a bunch of doorways moving quickly side to side, and they're moving so fast you can't grab one of the handles to open those doors. Plasma acts as a medium that slows down those doors so you can grab a handle and open it.
Explain that.
It's possible plasma slows down quantum vacuum fluctuations.
And how does it slow down quantum vacuum fluctuation?
It's an in-between state between a physical medium and a non-physical medium. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it acts as...
So it's like a carrier for the potentials in some way?
Correct. The same way that I would say that the work of Sal Paez's inventions, not to speak for him, but I know that he agreed with me when I brought it up to him, the devices themselves, including the, rumored free energy devices and so on, they're not generating the free energy. They're acting more as facilitators between the quantum vacuum and the material world.
So he goes on to talk about like a hum is an electromagnetic interaction with the gravitational field. Okay, so that's resonance. And if you know about the Schumann resonance, if you remove electricity and gravity from the earth, you get the Schumann resonance. That's the like sound that the earth it's a frequency that the earth resonates at. Okay, so that's like the sound. So sound is also a component here. They go on to talk about the brain being the quantum computer, and this is based off of Dean Radin's work. So perhaps the brain is sort of the processor that's behind these quantum fields collapsing, like these quantum potentials collapsing like around you in the making the present moment, okay? They're sort of talking, and Jesse asks, like, they start talking about the quantum field, right? Like there's like a quantum field around us that has all these potentials, and they say the quantum field holds memory or like information and potentials. And what happens is it collapses. And I've sort of been talking about that. It collapses in the present moment and creates what you see in the or what you experience in the present. Well, Jesse asks, what is the thing that causes these potentials to collapse into the field? And Dave's like, I can't talk about that. And it's so simple. It's so simple because you hear Abraham Hicks talk about it, you hear Joe Dispenza talk about it, you hear all these people talk about it. It's thought and intention. Okay? Like period, full stop. If there's like parts of your body that's a receiver, then there's parts of your body that's a transmitter. That is your thoughts, intention, and desires. This is what the manifestors, the like woo-woo manifestors have been talking about all along. And what's interesting is that they do go on to discuss that like when you combine all of this stuff, like the capacitor, the electromagnetic transmitter, the receivers, the supercapacitors, you create some like magnetism and then you add resonance through it, like you can create a time warp or a time loop. In fact, this is the way that Dave Rossi describes it. He says, gravitational effects come from electromagnetic conditions inducing topological states that would lead to the coupling to the gravitational field through the strong nuclear force that will literally warp space-time itself. So a portal or a time loop. And that's what Lou Elizondo was saying about anti-gravity in his interview with Joe Rogan. He was saying that you cannot uncouple or decouple or extricate anti-gravity technology with time travel.
That insulated you from the effects of Earth's gravity. Now, what is gravity? People think that, when I drop my glasses, that's gravity. That's not gravity. That's an effect of gravity. Gravity is the warping of space-time. And that's important because people you hear the term thrown around a lot, but they don't realize that space and time are actually connected. They are one and the same. They're opposite sides, if you will, of the same coin. And so you can't have one without the other. And so you have this ability to create a bubble around you that insulates you from the warping of space-time, let's say in this case Earth's gravity or something like that. Then the way you experience time inside that bubble is perhaps fundamentally different than the way you might experience space-time outside that bubble because you're not subject to the effects of gravity, which would explain potentially why things don't need wings and why they don't need propulsion systems like that, right? So it's a completely different way of looking at how we understand physics.
Dave Rossi goes on to explain that famous quote in Oppenheimer, where after Trinity, Oppenheimer says, "I am death, destroyer of worlds," which is a quote from the Bhagavad Gita. It actually is translated to "I am time, the destroyer of worlds." Because if we're going to hold this technology, we have to stop with the drive to destroy others. Like, we won't be able to hold this technology. Like, we will destroy ourselves, full stop, if we do not evolve to balance the divine masculine with the divine feminine. So we have to evolve. And the way we're going to do that is by meditating and by balancing our masculine and feminine, okay? Okay, I'm going to try to thread this needle for you of all the things that I've talked about. Okay, space-time exists as a matrix, right? These horizontal waves, the longitudinal, Caduceus, the heliocoidal waves, right? The scalar waves. By the way, Ross Coulthard in a recent interview said that like scalar weapons are the thing to look out for. So we know that these longitudinal scalar waves are like the piece, the missing piece behind this technology, okay? So you have this matrix and it has all of these quantum potentials within it. Okay, it's like it holds memory. Think of it as the Akashic, right? And it holds information. So your body is a capacitor, the in and the out. It communicates with the divine consciousness through the crown chakra. Okay, so you can get like ideas, creation, wisdom, all kinds of things. You can pull it down if it's what your heart desires. Okay, we'll get there. And the in and the out is the transmitter that communicates with the quantum field, okay? And all of these quantum potentials. Your soul is the plasma inside of the capacitor. So it's the capacitors are energy. They hold energy for when it's needed, okay? So the soul is the plasma is inside the capacitor. That's creating the energy. The lower three chakras are your energy centers. That's why it's really important to watch what you eat and make sure you're grounded, et cetera, et cetera. Your DNA, that third strand of DNA that gets activated through Kundalini, okay, and they said this in the podcast, the third strand of DNA is the capacitor, right? Particle accelerator. It's the particle accelerator, okay? So that Kundalini energy is this like particle accelerator that is behind a desire or an intention, which is in your heart space. Okay, so this is all relating to the chakras system. We're going to talk about heart-brain coherence. So heart is where the desire comes from. So like all of this stuff you're processing, you're getting from the field and you're like, do I want this? No. Do I want that? Yes. Contrast. No, I don't like that. That's something I want. That's something I like. Yes, let's bring more of that in. Okay. So your heart is defining your desire, your unique, authentic desire, okay, for your soul. Your third eye gets the vision for it, so you can actually picture it in the space. Then you add a resonance to it. So the heart-brain coherence, what you want and what you think about, is the electromagnetic transmitter. Now they say if you put electromagnetism, if you put resonance through an electromagnetic wave, it can bend space-time. It can manipulate space-time, okay? So that's why it's really important to speak your intentions out. It adds resonance to your electromagnetic transmitter. So you're pushing your desires out, you're adding that resonance to it, it's transmitting that signal out into the field, it's finding the things that resonate with those thoughts and desires, okay? It collapses space-time into the present moment, and you process that through your supercomputer and through your DNA receivers. Okay, so your DNA is actually creating the manifestation of the body inside of this desire. Okay, and the brain is processing it as your quantum supercomputer. It's processing it as the present moment. Does this make sense? This is what all these woo-woo manifestors were talking about. Okay, I really hope this makes sense. So theoretically, if you were to apply all of this, you manipulate time. You're manipulating space and time you're manifesting. Do I know how to create a time loop out of that? No, I don't. But these are all clues. And essentially, our body is a nuclear reactor. So make of that what you will. Dave Rossi says you can have theorists and then you can have engineers, but if you have someone who can do both, you have a problem.
Do you feel like after having gotten into some of these esoteric science, concepts, that it's made you a more spiritual person?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This is the part where most people, I know that you're very open to this. And as I've said before we recorded, I have great respect for you because you're so open to it, amongst other things. But yes, I believe the spiritual aspect is the key fundamental core of all of this. As much as people are so interested in physical things, I believe that the spiritual or / metaphysical angle is the core of all this, without a shadow of a doubt.
There's something else I want to add here. That's the pyramid in Giza. That pyramid, the chambers all line up with the human body chakras. So it's got a crown chakra, it's got a third eye, it's got a throat, it's got a heart, and there's other ones that are like underground that they have not gotten into yet. The pyramid is the same shape as the Merkaba. Okay, if you know what a Merkaba is, then you know where I'm going with this. The Merkaba is also the light body of your soul. Okay. So the pyramids are actually energy centers of the human body, just in like machine form. I hope I threaded the needle somehow. And also, I just wanted to say, Jesse Michaels, I love your podcast, but please stop putting those dumb thumbnails on them. It makes them impossible to share. And it's like really hard because your work and the conversations are so good that it's really hard when I share these videos for them to be taken seriously. So please, like, I'm just asking. If it feels like I got something wrong or you have additional questions about this, please leave them in comments because I want to talk about this stuff. I think that this is the key behind every single UAP conversation that we have. It's more about the body as technology, us being telepathic, us being like magical. I mean, talk about like ascended masters. There were ascended yogis who could levitate, who could heat themselves in negative 20-degree weather on the top of Mount Everest. Like there's healing capabilities through all of this. We're talking about manifestation. And we're talking about like the matrix as being love. It's love energy. It's God energy. Everything that is, all that's around. So anyway, I'll leave you with that. And I look forward to hearing your comments and I look forward to hearing you correct me because I just want to learn. Okay.